For nearly 2,000 years, history has remained silent. Between the childhood of Jesus Christ and the moment he emerged as a preacher, there exists a gap. 18 years, completely unaccounted for. No records, no eyewitness accounts, no official explanation. From the age of 12, when he was last seen debating scholars in the temple, to the age of 30, when he began his ministry, the story disappears. And for centuries, no one could explain why. Some said the silence was intentional. Others believed the truth had simply been lost. But now, something has changed. Because in a world driven by data, algorithms have begun doing what historians never could: analyzing ancient texts, cross-referencing languages, detecting patterns invisible to the human eye, and what they found is raising questions no one expected. Or fragments of forgotten manuscripts, obscure references buried in ancient scrolls, parallels between distant cultures, separated by thousands of miles, all pointing toward the same unsettling idea. What if those missing years were never truly missing? What if they were hidden? And more importantly, the life of New Testament provides the primary historical account of Jesus. Within it, only a handful of moments from his early life are recorded. One of the most notable occurs when he is around 12 years old, described in the Gospel of Luke. In this passage, Jesus is found in the temple in Jerusalem, engaging in deep discussion with religious teachers. After this moment, the narrative stops. The next time he appears in the biblical record, he is approximately 30 years old, beginning his public ministry. And so this gap has long been referred to by historians and theologians as the hidden years or lost years of Jesus. Confirmed facts: Jesus lived in Roman-controlled Judea during the early 1st century. The Gospels provide limited but foundational accounts of his life. There is a clear narrative gap between ages 12 and 30. Scholarly debates. Some scholars argue the gap is simply due to the focus of the Gospel writers, who prioritized his ministry rather than his early life. Others suggest that records may have existed but were never included or were lost over time. Speculative theories. Claims that Jesus traveled outside Judea during these years. Suggestions that he studied in distant regions such as India, Egypt, or Persia. Theories based on apocryphal texts or later traditions. It is important to note there is no universally accepted historical evidence confirming these journeys. However, that has not stopped researchers from looking. The anomaly is not just the absence of information, it's the precision of that absence. Ancient history is rarely complete, but in most cases, gaps are scattered, inconsistent, random. This one is different. The silence around Jesus' early adulthood is clean, uninterrupted, deliberate in appearance. And then there's another issue. Across multiple regions, from the Middle East to South Asia, there exist texts, legends, and oral traditions that describe a figure with striking similarities to Jesus, appearing during roughly the same time period. Different names, different languages, but eerily familiar teachings. Teachings about compassion, nonviolence, inner transformation. In some cases, even references to a young teacher from the West. Individually, these accounts could be dismissed, but taken together, they begin to form a pattern that raises an uncomfortable question. Is it coincidence or something more? In recent years, artificial intelligence has begun transforming how researchers approach ancient texts. Using machine learning models trained on thousands of historical documents, researchers can now Compare linguistic structures across languages, identify recurring narrative patterns, detect connections between texts previously considered unrelated. Unlike traditional analysis, AI does not rely on human assumptions. It looks for patterns, regardless of expectation. And when applied to ancient manuscripts, including texts related to the Dead Sea Scrolls and other lesser-known writings, something unexpected emerged. Certain phrases, metaphors, and teaching structures appeared in multiple regions. Some matched early Christian teachings. Others appeared in texts from regions far beyond Judea. Now, this does not mean AI has proven where Jesus went. What it has done is highlight correlations that deserve closer investigation. In some cases, texts previously dismissed as myth or legend are being re-examined, not as proof, but as potential clues. At this moment, where data meets belief, the tension becomes undeniable. Because now, the question is no longer just historical, it's technological. And as researchers dig deeper into cross-cultural texts, a second wave of interest begins to rise. And not everyone is convinced. In fact, many scholars urge caution. Historians emphasize that pattern recognition is not the same as proof. Just because two texts share similarities does not mean they share a common origin. Religious scholars, too, raise concerns. They argue that stretching limited evidence to fit a narrative can lead to distortion. Meanwhile, others suggest that institutions, both academic and religious, may be hesitant to explore theories that challenge long-standing interpretations. It is important to state clearly, there is no confirmed evidence of a coordinated cover-up. However, debates over interpretation, inclusion, and historical emphasis are very real, and in this case, deeply sensitive, because the implications are enormous. So what could explain these findings? 1. So conventional explanation. The simplest answer is that Jesus lived a relatively ordinary life during those years, working, learning, and preparing within his local environment. The gap exists because it was not considered significant to the gospel writers. 2. Alternative theory. Some propose that Jesus may have traveled, possibly encountering other philosophical or spiritual traditions. This theory draws on similarities between teachings found in different regions. However, it remains speculative and unverified. 3. Skeptical position. Skeptics argue that humans naturally find patterns, even where none exist. The similarities identified by AI may reflect universal themes in human thought, rather than historical connection. Each explanation carries weight, and none, so far, can fully resolve the mystery. At its core, this is not just a historical question, it is a human one. Why do these missing years matter so much? Because they represent something deeper than biography. They represent transformation, the journey between who someone was and who they became. For millions, Jesus is not just a historical figure, but a symbol of meaning, purpose, and belief. And the idea that part of that story is still unknown is both unsettling and compelling. It reminds us that history is not always complete, that even the most studied lives can still hold secrets, and that sometimes the questions we cannot answer are the ones that matter most. So after centuries of silence, and now, the rise of intelligent machines searching for answers, we are left with a single question. Were those 18 years simply lost to history? Or were they hidden, waiting to be rediscovered? Because if the truth is still out there, then this story is far from over.